The onX Advanced Masterclass for early June. I'm Adam. We're going to let folks roll in for a few more seconds before we get started, but thank you for being here. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, dispersed camping, in addition to off-roading. So I hope you're excited too. If you're just joining, go ahead and pop in the chat and maybe tell us where you're joining from, whether you're at home or you're out there traveling on a trip. Always love to see where folks are joining from. So go ahead and put it in the chat. And if you're interested in sharing what kind of rig you're driving, and maybe if you are thinking about planning a trip or have a trip planned in the next couple weeks or months or this summer, would love to know where you're going to travel. I'm always excited to see where people are going so I can check it out too. So feel free to put that in the chat. We're going to get started here in 1 minute. For those of you that are here, a little logistics. Feel free to put stuff in the chat, say hi, share stuff, to chat with each other. If you do have questions, we have a bunch of really smart onX customer support folks on, and there's a Q&A section separate from chat, so you are more than welcome to put your questions in there, and we'll get your question answered about anything I'm talking about tonight, or if you have other questions about onX Offroad. So chat for fun and just chatting with each other, Q&A for questions, and we'll make sure you get an answer tonight, or you get a follow-up if it's something that needs that. All right. Well, it's 6:01. You're here. I'm here. Let's rock and roll. So tonight's session is how to find and navigate to awesome dispersed campsites. I love this topic. I am an off-roader. I'm also a dispersed camper, and so this is like the happy place for me between these topics. So I am Adam Zolak, hosting this tonight. You may find me out on the interwebs at Bantha Overland, and I travel in a truck camper with my adventure buddy Val there in the center. And I love traveling with other folks in the middle of nowhere. I say nothing's better than desolation with a few friends. And I hope I see you out there too someday on the trail. So hopefully our paths may cross. I'm teaching this class because I love inspiring and enabling people to get out there more often around the campfire. And so, yeah, I hope that's what happens tonight. And we're going to get into it right now. So tonight we're going to talk a lot about motorized dispersed camping. And why are we going to talk about it, right? So for those of you that disperse camp, I'm sure many of you do, put it in the chat. What do you love about disperse camping? What do you think is super cool about it? Like, why? Why don't you just go to the campground or things like that? It's cheap. Solitude. Yeah, alone, right? Peace and quiet, really disconnect and get out there, right? So some photos from some of my own dispersed camping, trips and adventures. You just get to explore cool places. You get to go to a bunch of different environments. Sometimes you go with friends. Sometimes you can go to get away from it all. I love sitting around the campfire at the end of the day. And so that's why I love doing it. So we're going to get into onX real soon. I did just want to talk about a few things that I think are unique about dispersed camping, just so we can think about, well, how might we use onX Offroad to really use all those features and data to really plan really cool motorized dispersed camping. So, for one, you got to know where you stand. Like this applies when you off-road. You got to know that you're on public land or a trail you're allowed to be on. And camping is sort of the same thing, right? We're about to go out there and camp outside of a campground with no facilities and no reservations. And so how can we legally and confidently know we're allowed to be there and we're allowed to camp? Finding campsites, right? So we're not going to an address where the campground is and going to site 37. We got to find the sites. And I think that's a super fun part of it. But how do we do a little bit of planning and preparation before we leave? And how do we adjust as we're on the trail and maybe use backup campsites or something because somebody else is there? It's a giant mud pit. There's like 73 cows standing where we wanted to camp. There's weather and trail conditions, right? So those change, and maybe you want to be in the mud, maybe you want to be in the snow, maybe you don't. And then campsite amenities. Now, it's a joke, right? There aren't really any amenities at a dispersed campsite, but sometimes it's a fire ring. A view can be an amenity. A big rock when it's windy can be an amenity to shield you from that. Or staying connected, right? Is there cell phone coverage? Is there a clear view of the sky if you're using Starlink or something like that? So we're going to dig into these things. I'm going to show you how you can use onX Offroad to deal with these unique considerations of motorized dispersed camping. So the big announcement is we're going to look at the dispersed camping layer. It's like the most exciting thing I've seen in forever. It's really changed how I plan trips, and I hope you've checked it out. And if you haven't, you're going to check it out tonight or right afterwards, I'm sure. We're talking about finding sites. So how do you use satellite imagery, land ownership layers to sort of figure out where cool, awesome dispersed campsites might be? And then how do you mark those and save them and share them and organize them so that you're ready to go, especially if you're planning a couple different trips? What do you do before leaving? So we're going to talk about sharing if you're going with some friends and offline maps so you have the data you need to navigate on the trail. And then once you're out there on the trail, talk a little bit about navigation, adding more waypoints because a lot of the cool dispersed campsites I find are not always the ones I thought I was going to camp at when I planned the trip. I found cool spots on the ground as well. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about site selection as well. Okay, so that's it. We're going to get into it. It's onX Offroad app time. So I'm going to start here in onX Offroad in a web browser, just because this is often how I plan my trips before I leave. I have a slightly larger screen and I like that. I also sometimes use my phone if I'm doing this while traveling. So I'm going to start on the web. I'm going to then show you on my phone sort of how I would use it when I'm out there on the trail. And then I'm also going to show you an example from CarPlay. I have a Ford that has CarPlay in it. You could also use Android Auto. You could also use Android device or a tablet or all sorts of stuff. The experience is pretty similar, but if you have specific questions, ask and I'll explain the differences. All right. So we're here in onX Web, and I'm here hanging out near Denver, which is where I'm home based when I'm not traveling. I like it when I'm out there traveling. And a trip I always take in the spring is I go up to Wyoming. The weather's getting nicer. I want to get out. The mountains can sometimes still be a little bit snowy. And so I want to show you how I would plan a trip to, find a cool area in Wyoming, find some cool trails, and also talk about how do we find dispersed campsites? Because it's a heck of a lot easier than it used to be. So here I am in Denver. I'm going to go up to this area here in Wyoming, in Medicine Bow Route National Forest. If anyone's a local or has been there, shout out in the chat. And I did this a few master classes ago, and I said, one of the first things I do when I'm checking out an area is I say, what are the conditions? Do I want to be there? And what kind of trails are there? Do I want to be there? And now I'm going to say, where can I disperse camp, right? And so as I start to look at this area, I start to see green trails, blue trails. Now, I think a lot of you have used onX Offroad quite a bit, and you know that these are guided trails, right? They're like a ski map. Green is easy, blue is medium, black is difficult. There's even a red color. I almost never see red. It's crazy. But, right, we can go into these trails, we can click on these trails, we can look at them, and we can say, is this a cool trail? Do I want to be there? Right? Now, this one looks like it's temporarily closed, so we'll talk about trail reports in a second. But we can see the distance, we can see the elevation, we can see its technical rating, we can see that Micah submitted it. Thanks, Micah. We can see a description of it, right? We can read about it. Lots of dispersed camping. That's what we used to have to do. We used to have to like sleuth to find dispersed camping, right? Where do you see the dispersed camping layer here in a second? We can look at the photos, right? And we can start to get a sense of this area. Do I want to drive there, right? Could I camp there? Look, there's someone camped there. Someone took a picture of a map. That's very nice, right? So we start to get more information about the trail, right? We can read the difficulty rating. I also just love that these difficulty ratings, are on a scale. And it actually, so I'll do a little side here. Something interesting about these trails, I don't know if everybody realizes it. I just clicked on that trail and Micah had submitted it. These trails are submitted by real people, right? They're submitted by trail guides who go out there and run these trails and put more information on the map. So if you see this area, right, there's some trails that aren't green or blue or black. They're just sort of beige. And onX has that data, right? They pull it from the US Forest Service and BLM and hundreds of sources to say, you're allowed to be on that trail, right? We can off-road on that trail, but there's a little bit less information about it. And trail guides go out and run this trail. And so I am a trail guide, and I would highly encourage you, if you are interested in being someone that goes and explores some of these trails that don't have photos yet and don't have a difficulty rating, search for the onX Trail Guide program. You'll find this website where you can apply, and it's super cool. You get to go out and run these trails. Your name will be on it. There's lots of benefits. You get a free onX Elite account. You get some gear, and you get sort of just a little bit more information on the pulse of what's going on with onX. So definitely encourage you to check it out. It helps me to get out on some new trails I wouldn't normally go on and get to the end, even if they're challenging. So if you're into sort of missions, definitely look at the map, find some base trails, apply to the trail guide program, and help out the community. I appreciate it. I hope I run one of your trails someday. All right. So when I'm coming to an area like this, like I said, I normally look at these trails. I'm sort of a green and a blue trail person. I know that about me. I have a 11,000-pound truck camper. So I'll often, start to look for an area that has these kind of trails. I might even open Discover, right, which is going to show me trails sort of in the map area I'm viewing, and I can hover over them and sort of get oriented as to where they are. This Crow Spring Trail or road looks sort of cool, so I might click on that, right? And so this area looks cool. Like it's an area I want to drive around a little bit. But then I think the question is it an area I want to camp in? And so for me, I'll often switch to satellite imagery and I'll start to look at the terrain, right? I'll start to say, does this have cool views? Does it have cool hiking trails? Does it have cool rocks? Whatever you're into, right? Maybe you like to paddle, maybe you like to whatever, right? I come in here and I start looking around and I see, well, there are a bunch of hiking trails, and it looks like there's a bunch of cool rocks, right? So that's sort of cool. And then I just love coming in here and going into the 3D map, right? And I can really start to see, look at that, right? It's like a super cool area, right? There's these cool rocks to explore, right? There's cool hiking trails. And so at this point, I'm like, yeah, like I definitely want to go here, right? I definitely want to off-road. But the question that's always been super hard is where can I disperse camp, right? And so has anyone ever looked at an MVUM map? Like there are technically maps from the Forest Service to tell you where you can disperse camp, but like they're crazy hard to read and to find, and they're a pain in the butt. And you don't know where you are in the map because the dot's not there, right? And so I'm super excited to show you the new dispersed camping layer. So if you come in here, I'll do this again. If you come in here to this filter up here and you scroll down under trail type, there's this new map layer called dispersed camping. And watch what happens when I turn it on. You see all the yellow? Yeah. So the yellow basically means you are allowed to disperse camp on that road segment. So I'll flash it once more. You can see it come on. So all of these roads over here are roads you're allowed to disperse camp on. And it's super cool, right? Because you can just come in here, right? You can look at this road and say, this road's good, this road's good, this road's good. And if you actually click on a road, it'll tell you, it'll tell you It'll tell you the detailed dispersed camping regulations for that road. So it's super cool. This is the same information you'd find on an MVUM map. So in this case, it says motorized dispersed camping allowed on both sides of the road. So actually, this yellow highlight is specific to which side you can camp on. So if it's on this side, you can camp on that side. If it's on this side, you can camp on that side. Most of the time, you're going to see it on both sides, right? But it tells you that you're allowed to be there. It says the distance you're allowed to travel off-road. So different forests have different regulations. This number is normally between 1 and 300 feet, but you're allowed to travel off of a designated road for the purpose of dispersed camping, right? And so you have all this information right here in onX, and it's super cool because you can have that confidence that you're legally allowed to be there. And if you're planning a trip, I used to have to figure out, hey, do I want to be in this area? Do I think the trails are cool? And then I had to go look at a bunch of paper maps to figure out if I could disperse camp. So right now, this dispersed camping layer is only available for US forests in the West. onX is working to add it to forests in the East and also add it to different types of land like BLM, national parks, and things like that. So I think it's really helpful for forests because in my experience anyway, and I'm curious, put it in the chat if you found differently. On BLM land, you can generally disperse camp unless it says you can't. On national park land, you generally can't disperse camp unless it says you can, like in very specific situations like Death Valley National Park. But forests have all of these regulations. They have road closures, they have dispersed camping regulations. And so I love that onX has all of that information to show you, can you drive there? What dates can you drive there? And can you camp there, right? And so I think that's super cool, super powerful. So I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. And I'm going to show you this label you see if you're zoomed out a little bit. It says motorized dispersed camping allowed. And that basically means that somewhere, if you zoom in a little bit, you're going to find potentially off-road trails that allow dispersed camping, right? And so it's really cool now if you zoom way out on the map. Look at that. You can start to see all these areas where you could go find your solo free campsite away from everybody else, right? Now, two little gotchas I want to show you depending on where you live. So I'm going to go over here to LA. So some forests do not allow dispersed camping anywhere. And so motorized dispersed camping anywhere. And so we're going to go in here, Angeles National Forest near LA. You're not allowed to disperse camp. So if we zoom in, right? There are some roads in this forest. You're not allowed to disperse camp there. But if we go just to the east a little bit, to San Bernardino National Forest, you can disperse camp there. And we see lots of these yellow highlighted roads, right? So check that out. Like, make sure the forest is going to allow it, zoom out, see those labels a little bit. And then if you go over to the east, I'm from Pennsylvania, so this is where I grew up. And we come in here, motorized dispersed camping coming soon. So this will be there a little bit later this summer. I think onX just sort of prioritized the West because a lot of people love to adventure in the West. But it's coming to the East as well. And so look for that in the near future. And if you ever want to come in here and just turn it on, turn it off, you can toggle it right here. And you can even click layer details and it sort of describes a little bit more about how it works. So that is the new dispersed camping layer. I am super excited about it. I think it's going to totally change how we plan our trips and just make it a lot easier to find cool places to explore. So what I want to show you now, though, is a little bit, now that I have this information, I want to show you how I go about actually saying like, okay, I'm going to go on this trip. I want to find a couple places to go because right now I'm staring at 45 miles of forest road in this Pole Mountain area. I can disperse camp on most of it. You can't disperse camp down here in the bottom, but the rest you can. That's a lot of road to figure out, right? Like, and if we go over here to its sort of big brother in the snowy range, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands of miles of road to disperse camp on. So how do you pick, right? All of a sudden it's like, well, where do I want to go? What's cool, right? And so, one thing I'll look for, like I said, is the terrain, like rocks, hiking trails, just the kind of things I'm into. If I wanted to paddle, I'll look for lakes. You can see there's some little bodies of water in here. Another thing I often will do is I will turn on recent imagery. I'll go to the satellite layer, recent imagery, and I'll look to see if there's any snow. So at this time of year, I wouldn't necessarily expect it, but I sort of know this area. But if you didn't know it, right, it's a great way to come in here and see, is there any snow? Now you might be wondering what snow looks like. If you come over here to the other section of the forest, right, May 12th to the 26th, like a week or two ago, I'd say there's some significant snow still up here, right? And if you've never been up here in the snowy range, it's a beautiful place to be. It's not open that long of the year, but if you come up here, there's some cool trails. And you can actually see here a good example of a trail in onX that's closed seasonally, right? So if we come in here, we see that this trail is currently closed, and it's probably because it's only open certain dates of the year, just because of the fact that it's sitting in a snowbank right now. So I'll often look at recent imagery. You can also go forward and backwards in recent imagery. So if you're trying to figure out, well, when did the snow melt last year or something like that, that can be a pretty useful tool. Another thing, I'll often look at when I'm looking for a campsite is I'll look to see, if there's any forest fires going on or anything like that. So if we come into layers, we can come in and turn on active wildfire, wildfire smoke, and historical wildfire, because sometimes you don't want to go hang out in an area where a bunch of dead trees are probably going to fall on you. Or you're at least going to need a chainsaw to get down the trails. So I often turn those layers on. Now, again, right now, thankfully, I don't think there's a lot of forest fires going on. I think if I go all the way out, Canada doesn't look so great right now, right? But I normally always have that layer on. But the other thing you can do with it, right? If we come over here, right, there were a bunch of fires over here just a couple of years ago. And so you might not want to travel here because the Mullen fire was here in 2020. And you might want to check out that area a little bit more specifically before you decide to go off-road and camp there. So those can be useful layers. One other layer I like to use as well, whoop, sorry about that, is the cell phone layer. And you know what? I'm actually going to show you this on my phone because why not? So let me just start that sucker up here. All right. So we're going to go up to the same area here because I just want to show you how it's sort of similar between web and mobile. So if you're here on mobile, this is iOS, very similar on Android. You can come down here to your activities, and you can come and say you want to see the Verizon coverage up here in this area. You turn on this layer and you get this red, right? And the darker the red, the better the cell phone reception is going to be. And so you can see it's a little, it's pretty okay. You might have signal. I think it might work out for you. You can also come in here and switch to a different provider. So let's say you had AT&T, which is often a little bit better in the middle of nowhere. you can see they have a little bit more coverage across all of this area. And if you ever want to come in and get the details, you can just come into the details and you can see the darker blue is 5G coverage, and then it goes down to 4G and voice text and things like that. So I love to check those layers as well. And then I want to show you how I actually find quote, sort of cool dispersed campsites. So we'll come back to the mobile device here in a second, but what I really start doing is after I know I want to drive on that road and I know I can disperse camp on that road, I just zoom way the heck in with satellite imagery, right? And I start looking at where people have previously dispersed camp. Because in general, like 99.9% of the time, you're looking for a site that's previously impacted, a site that someone has previously camped in and is available, right? No one's in it. And so I'm normally coming in down here and just looking to see like, well, where does it look like there could be cool sites, right? And as I come down here, I start to see tracks, right? Somebody obviously drove off the road here and camped here, right? So if I like that site, I might come over here on the right. I'll show you this again and click the waypoint marker. I might drag that to the campsite. Now, for me, I always use the same kind of icons and colors to mean certain things. It's sort of my map key. And so I will click camp. This is what I use for free camping. I use this one, camp fee, for a campground, but I like dispersed camping. So I'll pick camp and I'll come down here and I use yellow for dispersed campsites. And that way I know forever and ever and ever, yellow always means the dispersed campsite option. And in this case, I previously created a folder called 2025-06 Weekend Campout. I always name my folders like this so it's easy to find with the year and the month. And I'll just add that waypoint. And I'll show you a little later why I love to add things to folders. But I'm going to add that. Now, if you needed to come in here and make a new folder, you can come into My Content and hit New Folder. And you can go ahead and make yourself a new folder. I already had that one created. And then I sort of just drive down the road and I find other sites. So like here's a site, right? And at some point you want to probably start being a little bit picky. I'm just finding the first site I see, right? And so one way I often do that is I'll come into 3D tilt, right? So I'll come in here, come to 3D mode here, right? And I'll start to just literally almost drive down the road. And one of the reasons I like doing this is because when you're there on the ground, sometimes you can't see a site. Sometimes it's behind some rocks or some trees. You might be driving past, staring at something on the right. Maybe you're like trying to not hit a cow. Those baby cows, right? They're unpredictable. And there's a cool spot on the left, right? And so I just like to drive down this and check out cool sites. Like here's a cool example, right? This site looks like it's tucked back here behind these rocks and I might not see it, right? So I might do that. Now, sometimes if I'm feeling like it's the site, the best one, I pick a different icon. And I don't know why, but I picked the sheriff badge to mean like prime dispersed campsite. So I'll come in here, add the sheriff badge, add it to my folder, save it, right? And there you go. And one of the nice things about the color in the icon is, when I'm adding other kinds of waypoints, I will name them. But for these, I don't even name them, right? I just leave it named waypoint, the date, whatever, because I just know by the color in the icon what it is. So nice little hack. Um, oh yeah, look at that. I think that's the sheriff badge site. So I'm gonna add one more marker here. I think this is like the site of sites. It's got a cool rock. Fun to play around on. I'm going with a friend that has some kids and they always love to play on rocks and stuff like that. It's the dispersed camping playground. So yeah, that's generally what I do. Now, I, don't necessarily camp at these sites, but what this helps me have is an area that I'm going to go explore when I get there, right? So instead of having to say, "Oh, there's 45 miles of trails, where might I go?" I might come over here and say, "Well, sometimes there's a lake here, there's some cool rocks." There's some cool terrain, right? It's a little bit away from the main area down here, which is probably a little bit busier. And so it just gives me some spots. So I may wind up camping at a spot that I didn't mark here, but this definitely gives me a place to go and start exploring those spots. And I find that super helpful. I also normally mark 3 or 4 spots in each area just because I never know when someone else might be there, right? Like the spot might be taken. It might have those 73 cows in it. And so I like to have some options and then I adjust when I'm there. So I'm going to come back over here on my phone and show you a couple phone tricks that I like to use that I think are super helpful. And you can do all this on your phone if you want. So one new thing in onX you might see is they added waypoint clustering. And so you can see here it says 4, and that's just trying to hide some of those pins so that I don't have to stare at them and the map isn't busy. So you can turn that on and off in settings, but it's probably on for everybody. But it just came out a little while ago. And you can come in here and you can see those 4, waypoints that I added previously. Now, if we come in here, I'll show you how to, if you want to do the 3D, you can just come in here, go to 3D. You can use 2 fingers and you can sort of tilt around. It's actually sort of easier to do on your phone than in a web browser, honestly. Right, and there's that super cool rock with that really cool campsite that we found before. Now, I know I already had a pin here, but let's say you wanted to add a pin on your mobile device. One really cool trick is you can just long press. So if you just leave your finger there for a second, it'll say, do you want to add a waypoint or build a route? So I'm going to add a waypoint. I'm going to add the camp. I'm going to add the yellow. I'm going to add it to my folder. And there you go. So that's super easy. Another cool trick is that if you want to zoom out, you can just tap with 2 fingers. And then if you want to zoom in, you can double tap with 1 finger. And so it's pretty nice on mobile. I wish I could do this on my laptop. But yeah, that's basically how I add dispersed campsites when I'm looking for cool places. Now we're gonna do something cool here in a second. Um, so let me show you my folder. So one of the reasons I like making a folder is because I'm often traveling with friends and I like to be able to share the plan with my friends, right? And so I also like to stay organized myself and be able to go back and find sites and stuff to share with people, but I'm often going with a friend. And so I often will share what I'm putting on the map with a friend, and a folder just lets me share it once. So you could come in here and you could share, individual waypoints, right? But we'd have to do them one by one. A folder is really going to let us share just the folder and everything that's in it. And one of the super cool new things that was added a little while ago is collaborative folders. So I'm gonna make a new one here so you can see how this works. So when you make a folder, it's going to ask you if you want it to be view only or contribute, so collaborative. And if you make it a contribute folder, you and your friends can both add stuff to it. And so it lets you plan stuff together. So I previously made this folder for the weekend camp out collaborative, and we're going to share it in the chat. And what I'd love you to do if you're on your phone or you're on the web browser tonight, I would love it if at some point during this class you went in and you added a cool spot people should check out. And at the end of this class, we're all going to have this map with cool spots all across the United States. So a cool place to camp, a cool place to off-road, just a cool place to check out. If you have a place in mind, please add it to the collaborative folder, and then I'll refresh the map at the end and we can all see what we created together. But hopefully that'll give you some cool options to explore this summer. All right. So the other thing I want to show you is sort of how I use routes. So everybody uses routes a little bit differently. You don't necessarily need to add them. I like to add them, especially when I'm planning trips with other folks, just to help people understand, well, how the heck are we going to get there? Or, at least the rough itinerary. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'll show you that again. So on the right, I'm going to click build route, right? And then I might decide how I'm going to come in based on trails that I reviewed. So I'm probably coming in on, whoops, probably coming in on 80 here. Let's start over. I think I clicked once too many times. All right. So I'm probably coming in on 80. And I'm going to come in here, right? And I might follow this trail and then come down here and then come over to these dispersed campsites, right? So I will name these. So I might say approach route day 1, right? I use pink for stuff that I haven't done yet. That's not a dispersed campsite. It's just my weird thing. It's the color I use. So I'm going to make it pink. I'm going to add it to my folder. So this will automatically be shared with all of you in a second once it goes out there in the internet and you refresh. Um, So yeah, at that point we have a route. And so this is basically how I'll often plan a trip. I'll put in a couple routes, maybe one big route or a route per day if we're doing multiple days. I'll put in a few campsites. If we were moving, I'd come up here and find a couple other dispersed campsites. Um, right? I might come in here and say, oh, there's some cool rocks, right? Doesn't look like it's going to be too busy. Here's obviously a site that looks like somebody circled the wagons, so might be better for a bigger vehicle that has a trailer, fifth wheel, something like that, right? And that's sort of my basic workflow for how I find dispersed campsites in an area and plan. Now, I will say, this isn't always where I end up, like I was saying before. And so one of the things that's really important to me is to make an offline map. So I make an offline map. So when I'm there on the ground, if I go to all the sites I pinned and they're full or I don't love them, I have that satellite imagery. I have the map. I still have the routes. I still have the dispersed camping layer information to be able to make decisions on the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and make an offline map. So I'm going to come in here, offline maps, new offline map, and then I'm just going to try and get a box around the area where I want to visit. In this particular case, that's pretty good. I always use medium. Basically, when you're picking the size of the map, you're really picking the satellite imagery. So I'm just going to cancel out of this and show you real quick. So no matter what size map you download, you're always going to get the topo information, right? You're always going to get enough information to navigate, to see basic terrain, things like that. Really what you're picking when you're doing an offline map is the resolution of the satellite imagery, right? So if you think you're going to be in an area where you really need to get all the way in here and have every last grain of detail, right? Then you're going to want to pick the higher resolution. I normally go with medium because, I might need to look for an alternate campsite, but often I'm just going to my pins or following my route. So if you come in here, offline map, new map, we'll put that in the box. We'll pick medium. We'll call this Pole Mountain. By the way, I'm sure you've already put it in chat, but anybody been here? It's an old artillery range. You can find unexploded ordnance somewhere. Um, okay. So I created my offline map. And then at this point, I need to go over to my mobile device, which this is so nicely telling me, and download it, right? So you can make an offline map on your mobile device. You can make it on your web browser, but it really only exists on your mobile device. So I'm going to come over here. Let me grab my phone. Okay. I'm going to come over to offline maps. You know what? Let's just make a new one so I can show you how this works. So there's the one I created before, but if you want to do it on your phone, it's very similar. You just sort of, put a box. We see the box of our one we created previously, but you just put a box around it, select your detail level, and finish just like you did on web. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and download this. I'm going to tap download. It's going to download pretty fast because I'm on my home connection. It'd be pretty fast on like 5G or Starlink 2, right? And once that finishes downloading, I basically have my offline map, and I can, not have a connection and still be able to get out there and find stuff if I need to. Okay. So another cool thing I want to show you is, when you're ready to go, onX a couple months ago released navigation, which is a pretty cool feature. And so, I used to use Google Maps or Apple Maps for navigating to the trailhead and then using onX once I got to dirt, right? But wouldn't it be cool if you could just navigate using a single app? And so one of the cool things you can do now is you can pick like a waypoint and you can say navigate, and then you can pick onX navigation, right? And so you can still pick another navigation provider, but in my experience, Apple and Google do not do a great job on dirt. I would not want them routing me through a forest. Bad things would probably happen. And so onX navigation is super cool in that you can go from door to campsite to dirt trail, and navigate that whole route with a single solution. So because it's a little hard to show you from my house, I made a little video of using onX navigation around town and also in Death Valley National Park. I'm going to play that now so you can see what it's capable of. You can pull up that waypoint or route and you can hit navigate. And in the past, you've been able to navigate using Apple Maps or Google Maps, but there's a new option for onX navigation. And if you select that, it'll give you turn-by-turn directions on-road and off-road, which is really cool because a lot of mapping services do not work very well when you get off-road as well. And so if I wanted to go ahead and follow this route, I'd hit go.
Head north on Harlan Way, then turn right onto West 76th Avenue.
And so you can hear the prompts. And so you can zoom in, you can zoom out. If you pop this up, you can look at the detailed directions if you need to see that. And then you can also preview the route. And then you can always also sort of switch between your heads up, zoomed in view and the total route view like this. And then you can also switch your orientation. So if you want your direction facing north versus north facing north, you can do that. You can toggle the sound on and off. And so you get your written instruction and you get your audio instruction. And so if you just have a phone, you can go ahead and use your phone. It also works in landscape, which is nice. I happen to have CarPlay, and so I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like here on CarPlay, and I'll drive around a little bit so we can see this in action.
In less than half a mile, turn right onto Sheridan Boulevard.
And one thing I like to do sometimes too, like if I'm passing a trailhead or a campsite I might want to check out later, I'll use this mark button, and you can use it to either start recording a track or mark my location. So I'm going to mark my location, and you'll see it drops a waypoint right there, and it just makes it really easy for me to go back later in the app, and I can update it and say it was a campsite or whatever. But a lot of times that's how I mark my campsites, because I just find cool campsites as I drive by it, or maybe a trailhead I want to visit the next day.
On to West 70.
So yeah, I use that all the time. Like if I'm just driving down the road and I see a site that I haven't marked before, and I said that would be an amazing dispersed campsite, but I'm not done driving for the day, or I'm trying to get a little bit further, I'll mark it, because sometimes like I'll drive the next 10 miles and there's no sites, or all the sites are full, or something is happening, and I'll come back and I'll camp at that site that I dropped from touching the mark button on Android Auto or CarPlay. So I love that. I definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't used it before. Okay, so we covered a lot, dug into dispersed camping details and some little nuances and tips and tricks for finding cool dispersed camping. I'm going to pause here and ask if we have any good questions that have come through that maybe would be helpful to address to everyone, and I can dig in a little bit more.
Hey, Adam, you're doing a great job on class. We do still have customer service in the Q&A, so if anyone has a question related to the app, they can drop those questions in for a few more minutes for customer service. But a question that just came in from Mike is, could you go through how to name your offline maps? And then one other question from earlier in the night was, could you go over to your toolbar again and explain what those tools do?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, let's do it. So, um, let me just come through and do the tools, and then we can also talk about naming as we go as well. So, over here on the right, there's a couple different tools. There's build a route. There's draw line, measure distance. There's draw a shape, measure area. There's add a waypoint, and there's add a photo waypoint. So build a route is this one here, where if we want to say, hey, I want to drive on this trail, you can come in here and click and then sort of follow the road wherever you want to go. And right now it's on snap to, so it's basically snapping to the road. Now, if I wanted to, I could just come through and click a couple points to tell it sort of where I want it to go, right? I could also switch to point draw. So let's say I said, and then I'm going to just fly over this river somehow, right? I could come over here and do point draw, and then I could change back to snap to and come here along the road. Now you can always, name your route here, give it whatever color you want. Sometimes they use different styles. So like I will use a dash line if it's an alternate route. So sometimes if I'm worried about a trail being impassable, I will come in here and, use a dash line or something like that. Then of course I always add it to my folder. So that is that tool. We also have the waypoint tool, which we used before to mark a campsite, but you can come in here and say whatever you wanted. There's a ton of icons. So like if you saw an old cabin, right? You come in here and use the cabin icon, make it whatever color you want, and save that. Some of the tools I don't use as frequently, but they can be super useful. So the draw a line measure. So let's say you just wanted to figure out how far it was from here to here. You can come in here and draw a line and it'll tell you how far it is. Now, one super cool trick on mobile is actually if you come in here and you want to do the same thing on your phone, you can just drop two fingers. I'm just going to drop both fingers on the screen and it'll also measure the distance. So I use that all the time. Like if my friend's like, we're going to be at camp in like 10 minutes. And I'm like, dude, it's 50 miles, right? That can be a really cool trick to use on your mobile device. So that's how you can make a line. You can also make an area. So like sometimes I might use an area to say like, hey, let's camp in this area. Right? So you could do that. So I'm not going to add a photo because I don't have one ready to go, but you can imagine it adds a waypoint with a photo. So those are some of the other tools and you can name them. You can put them in folders. If you come over to my content, you can come find them by type. So like if we wanted to just look at our waypoints, we could come in here and see our different waypoints and select them and filter them and things like that. And then for the offline map, if you want to come in here and create an offline map on the left, it says offline maps. If you want to come rename one, you can come in here and say edit map, the three dots here for Pole Mountain. So we'll edit that and we'll just call it Pole Mountain 2. And then you can come in here and save it. And then that'll be updated on your devices once it syncs. All right. Good questions. I also like using these tools. They're infinite in their possibilities if you think creatively. So it can be pretty cool. All right. Well, any other big questions or what do you think?
No, Adam, I think it looks like everything is getting answered within customer service. If they didn't get to your question, you can always connect with customer service at help@onxmaps.com. So we still have quite a few open questions, but the webinar is almost over. So if we didn't get to you, definitely reach out via email.
Cool. All right. Well, so we're near the end and I appreciate you coming. I do want to show you the work we've done together. So we have our weekend camp out folder. I'm actually going to rename this to, well, no, I'm not. I'm going to leave it what it is, but I'm going to zoom out here and you can start to see all the places we've added. So these are all different waypoints that folks have added that weren't me. And I think if we come in here and we look, we have over 70 folks in this folder. So that's super awesome. We have 21 waypoints and we have a couple routes. So keep it coming. Add it now, add it in a little bit. Check back on this map maybe later tonight or tomorrow. And I hope this gives you some cool places to explore and also helps you figure out how the contribute folders can be helpful to you when you're planning a trip. That's all I have. I had one other question I'd love for you to answer in the chat if you're still with us. So I'm going to be doing another advanced masterclass in the next couple months, and I would love to know an area that you would love us to go to for that masterclass. So I try and switch up the areas from time to time. So we're not only learning about how to use onX Offroad to plan really cool trips and find cool camping, but also explore new areas of the country. So if there's an area where you're like, darn, I'd love to find dispersed camping there or trails, or I've always wanted to learn more about it, put it in the chat and maybe that'll be the area we explore for our next topic. All right. So that's what I got for tonight. If you haven't tried it already, please come in here, turn on your dispersed camping layer and check out all the cool places you can camp. I think for me, just seeing this has just opened up a world of possibilities to think about the places I can go. And one cool thing, I don't think it's super practical, but if you come in here and you turn off the trail types, you'll just see the yellow, right? And it just starts to show you like there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of miles of places that you can go explore and disperse camp after a long day of off-roading and enjoying the trails. So I hope that this inspires you to do it and helps you to do it. And I hope to see you out there real soon. Until then, I'm Adam. Thanks for coming. Bye.